My name is Erica Wood. I'm the Chief Community Impact Officer at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and I am delighted to welcome you all to this really exciting event as part of Choose Children 2018, which is our statewide campaign to make early childhood a budget and policy priority here in California. I am very pleased to acknowledge our board chair, Sam Johnson, who is here with us this morning, as well as our CEO and president, Emmett Carson. So on behalf of all of my colleagues at the Community Foundation, welcome. It's so great to see you. So today is one of 5 fora that we are holding with gubernatorial candidates to hear directly from them about their vision for California, and what that vision is going to mean and how it's going to impact our youngest children and families here in the state. Why do we need this Choose Children campaign? Any guesses? Don't be shy. Well, I'm very passionate on this topic, so I'll tell you why. For far too long, California has not prioritized our youngest kids. And in fact, we have systematically disinvested in the programs that support them. And this is in spite of the overwhelming evidence that says these investments matter for our kids, for our community, and our economy. So now more than ever, we need this campaign. And we have an opportunity in 2018 to ensure that our next governor is a champion for our youngest kids and makes early childhood a signature issue in the gubernatorial race. If you haven't had the chance to look at our website, I encourage you to do so. You'll find a lot of great information about the campaign, other upcoming events. It's on the screen behind me. No, it's not. ChooseChildren.org. It's easy to remember. I remembered it. And I would also encourage you to tweet during this event. We really want to build a movement and get the word out and get a lot of support behind this campaign. So you'll see our Twitter handle on the screen beside me. The last thing I'll say is that a campaign needs a lot of support, and we couldn't do this work without tremendous partners. Some of them who are here in the room today: Ted Lempert with Children Now. We have California Strategies in the room with us. We have First Five in the room with us. We are so privileged to be working with best-in-class partners, including donors, media, and advocates throughout the state. So we're excited about the campaign. We're excited about today. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Abu Makdessian, our Vice President and Director for the Center for Early Learning, who will take us through the rest of the program.
Our featured guest today, she's the former superintendent of public instruction for the state of California. She's the only woman to hold that post before and since. And now that I thought about it, imagine that, where 3 out of 4 public instructors or teachers in the state are women, and she's been the only woman to hold that post before or since. Before that, she was an assembly person representing the 18th district in the assembly, mostly Alameda County and the city of Oakland. And she was also a member of the city council in Union City, where there's a school named after her. That's my dream one day, to get a school named after me. Her leadership in transportation, in consumer protection, and in environment cannot be understated, but she's most well known for her passion and her commitment to public education and the children and families of our state. Her full bio is in your packet for reference, and certainly you can check out her website either during or after the event. So with that, we're thrilled to have her kick off our gubernatorial forum, as she is the right person to kick it off. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Delaine Eastin. So Delaine, let's just get right into it. Why are you running for governor?
Well, first let me say I'm very honored to be here with all of you, and I'm running for governor because I choose children. The reality is, I did run for state superintendent of public instruction because I was very concerned about the state of education in California. I had chaired the education committee. And by the way, my district actually didn't go to Oakland. It included Union City, Newark, Fremont, Milpitas, and the east side of San Jose. So this is not my first rodeo in Santa Clara County. I visited many districts down here. But let me just say to all of you, I left the job as state superintendent in 2003, and I went back and ran the National Institute for School Leadership, and then I came back to California, and I was a Mills College professor and distinguished visiting professor of educational leadership. But I kept watching the state of California disinvest in children. And the truth be known, when I graduated from high school in Carlmont High School in Belmont, California, California was 5th of the 50 states, tied with New York in per pupil spending. This morning we are 41st of the 50 states. New York spends twice as much per child. There's this fiction going through the capital that somehow they've reinvested in schools and they fixed the problems. And the truth is you have some districts that are basic aid districts and they get more money, and some of them are here. But the vast majority of districts in this state are fundamentally underfunded. To be in the most expensive state in the union with the highest percentage and number of poor children, and to be 41st in per pupil spending? And what does that mean? Well, it translates into, and I want to come back to the whole idea of preschool and child development. I had a universal preschool task force in 1997. In 98, when the report came out, we called for universal preschool within 10 years. That was 19 years ago. Hello? There's more preschool availability in, you're sitting down, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Florida than there is in California. The truth is that we are letting our kids down from 0 to 5, and I was the honorary co-chair of Prop 10 that created First 5. I put my money where my mouth is. I have supported preschool consistently. And when Arnold Schwarzenegger tried to steal the money from First 5, I went on the road to defeat that effort, and you only voted him down 2-1, by the way. Thank you. But at the end of the day, from 0 to 5, we are not doing a good enough job. From kindergarten to 12th grade, ladies and gentlemen, kindergarten is not mandatory in the state of California. It should be mandatory. It should be full day. And then we have to reinvest in schools, so we reduce class size so that we can actually have a relationship between the teacher and the students. And did I mention? We need to reinvest in community colleges, CSUs, and UCs. To have built 6 campuses since 1965. That's 1 UC, 2 community colleges, 3 CSUs, total of 6 campuses. In that same period of time, we built 23 prisons. So I say budgets are statements of values, and the budget of California does not reflect my values because it does not put children first. Thank you for what you're doing here. I'm with you 100% of the way.
Thank you for that, Delaine. Now, you laid out some of the challenges that the state has faced, but also some of the ways that the current administration has tackled them. What would you do differently, and what do you see as some of the challenges in your first term that you would try to tackle?
Well, first, there would be a full court press. I now am calling for universal preschool within 5 years because we waited 19. We may as well get on it here. But the truth is we really need to work on prenatal care. We need to work on early childhood care and health care and nutrition from 0 to 3. Then we need to have a comprehensive preschool program such that every child has an opportunity for preschool. Kindergarten needs mandatory and full day. And then we need to reinvest in K-12 and in higher ed. We need more higher ed so we can train the next generation of preschool teachers in California. Should not be people with a handful of units. They should be people with bachelor's degree. We should be like France. You should have the same level of education and the same pay as an elementary school teacher. Because too many of our teachers are leaving the preschool profession. They just can't afford to do this work. I had a young woman who was an intern at Sac State come to my office. She loved being a preschool teacher, but she was getting her master's. She needed to make a better salary because she had 4 kids she wanted to send to college. She was marvelous, and so I hired her after she finished her internship program. Some of you know her as Camille Mabin, head of First 5 of California. She worked for me for more than 12 years, and first as in the legislature and eventually in the superintendency. And I will just say to all of you that I want people that understand that this is not a place where we care for kids. This is a place where we do child development. The steepest curve of learning is 0 to 5. 90% of the brain development occurs by the age of 5. So I love The Scientist in the Crib. Most of you, I bet, have read it. The line I think is so spectacular is the human baby's computational system is a network wired together by language and love instead of fiber optics. That's what we need. Language, love, music, art, a chance to develop small motor skills as well as to draw and paint and play. But it's also about developing their brains. And I just don't want to be too much about, we don't want them to, learn the preamble of the Constitution when they're 4. But we do want to have a completely wonderful experience for them. And it needs to be diverse and reflect the entire learning curve.
Now, Delaine, I know a lot of these proposals and where you stand on these issues, you've gained a lot of insight from visiting hundreds, if not thousands, of schools around the state. And you've even gone abroad. And I know one of the experiences you've had was visiting programs in France. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about some of the insight you got from what other countries are doing with young children?
Well, thank you, Avo. It was one of those experiences in life where you read a lot about something or you think a lot about something and then you get a chance to visit your dreams. So I was invited as a guest of the French-American Foundation to visit French preschools. Karen Hill Scott, who many of you know, founded Crystal Stairs. She was my co-chair of my Universal Preschool Task Force. So she and I went together to see the French preschools. I cannot begin to tell you how amazing it was. I was expecting to be impressed, but I was blown away. They had these fabulous schools. The federal government of France actually pays the salary of the teachers. They have the same level of education and the same salary as elementary teachers. The buildings are provided by the local school district, whatever they call them. But it's a real relationship between the national government and local governments. And we went into these schools and we saw these amazing, first we got to see the creche, which is before 3, for kids that aren't potty trained. Those are smaller settings. They had like a dozen kids with 2 adults, but they have really, even those are developmental. Then we went to L'École Maternelle and it was just phenomenal. And I can't even begin to tell you the energy and wonder that was there. The typical school day is 8 to 4. That's all paid for by the government. If you have to drop your child off early, you can buy wraparound services from 7 to 8. Or if you'd have to pick your child up after 4, you can buy wraparound services from 4 to 5. But everything else is paid for, just as K-12 is in this country. The day was amazing. The lunch period was especially something. It was silverware and cloth napkins and honest-to-God dishware with real utensils that were made of metal, not plastic. And the meal was, well, the first day, let's see, we had radicchio salad with roast lamb. The second day was a shepherd's pie with arugula salad. I have never eaten better food in a school in my life, and that includes when Alice Waters was making lunch at the Edible Schoolyard. It was as good as anything I've ever eaten. The meal is actually a 2-hour affair, so the kids, if they finish, they can go outside and play and do other things. But when I spoke to the woman who was the number 2 at the Ministry of Education, and I think this is the story you probably like, it was wonderful. She said, I know California very well. My son, he's married to an American who lives in Menlo Park, California. He is a doctor, and they have 2 wonderful children, but they must pay a lot of money, great lot of money, to have a preschool for their children. And I want to know why you don't have it. And I said, well, one of the reasons I'm here is I'm looking for data and information that I can go back and sell Universal Preschool with. So I want to just hope you'll share with me some of the studies and some of the research you've done here in France. And she looks at me and she goes, we French, we do not have as many of the great research institutions that you Americans have. We use your research. And so as someone who's actually read the tome From Neurons to Neighborhoods and has seen the research that we have done in this country, it is almost criminal to know what we know now about early childhood development and for us not to be just on fire to improve nutrition, to improve so many other aspects of what we're doing. And yet we're in danger at the federal level of actually taking a big step backward. Let me tell you one other story because I think it was very touching to me. My oldest friend, we've been friends since we were 7. She's a retired teacher living with her brother's family outside of Austin, Texas. And I went there to visit her, and she took me to the LBJ Ranch. You have to understand, I've been a little bit angry at Lyndon Johnson ever since the Vietnam War. But I went to the ranch, and the tour guide took us into this one-room schoolhouse where Lyndon had started the school. And she went on to explain that when he was 4 years old, Lyndon's mother took him by the hand into that schoolroom and said to the teacher, you know, we are sharecroppers and we have terrible financial problems. I need to go back to work as soon as I possibly can. My son Lyndon can read. It would mean the world to me if he could start school when he was 4. And the teacher says, well, we usually want him to be 5. And the mom said, well, if he could read and he could do the work, wouldn't it be okay if he was here? She said, show me. The mother said, well, I didn't bring a book. Don't worry, I've got books. And she went over and took a book off the shelf that Lyndon had never seen before. And she sat down with him, and Lyndon proceeded to read the book. And so the teacher said he could stay. And years later, Lyndon said, being able to start school at the age of 4, he felt gave him a head start on his education. This is the president who proposed Head Start and who saw it to fruition. And I sort of forgave him that day because I think, in fact, his instincts were very good.
Thank you, Delaine, for those stories. And you touched on a few things that, when Head Start was first proposed, there was a lot of debates in Congress. But at the end of the day, it won over because of all the public support for it, especially with a lot of families coming back from the war and wanting to maintain that level of child care that they've seen through the war, and Head Start was another answer for that. We at Silicon Valley Community Foundation just commissioned a poll we shared with you that showed that 9 out of 10 voters in California want to support a gubernatorial candidate that supports children. What do you make of that overwhelming support from the community on this issue?
I think that's one of the reasons I'm running. Everywhere I have gone, people have been confused as why we haven't made this a priority. If those people coming out of the dark depression and the greatest war the world has ever seen could invest in education without research, they were just flying by the seat of their pants. But we have the research. We know what we should be doing. And, I really do think it's phenomenal that in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson actually knew to do this. And now we've got people in Washington, D.C. talking about getting rid of Head Start, talking about moving away from school nutrition, talking about backing off from some of the historic commitments and I would actually argue the federal government is pretty timid if you compare us with all of Europe and most of Asia. I really loved the poll that you all did, and I think, Mark Twain said the problem with common sense is it's not very common. I think if you actually go out and listen to the people of California, they're ready for this. When Arnold tried to take the money from First Five, they said no by a wider margin than they wanted to do it in the first place. It was like everybody got that this was the right thing to do. It's working, it's just not going far enough. It's sort of like, I'm amazed, when you go to Europe, there's only 4 countries that don't have paid maternity leave. California has a little bit, we're trying to get a little more, but there's only 4 nations on earth that don't have it. The United States, the others, since you're all sitting down? Papua New Guinea, Swaziland, and Lesotho. Those are the other 3 countries. How do you like hanging with that crowd? That is not the America that I'm a part of, that I want to be a part of. So I want our California to lead. And right now, when Jeb Bush was governor, the people of Florida, he told them, don't do child care, don't do child development, don't do preschool. And they voted him, they overrode his objections to it. So Florida has done it. And there's more preschool really and truly in Georgia and Oklahoma than there is in California. We need a full court press to understand that it's pay me now or pay me later. There's an amazing criminologist study that was done, that criminologists and economists that got together, and they show that kids that go to preschool are less likely to wind up in criminal justice, less likely to be on welfare, less likely to be unemployed for long periods of time, more likely to complete high school, and more likely to go to college and graduate. It's an investment. And this is what I learned in my period in the private sector. You differentiate expense from investment. Companies always try to keep their expenses down. They always try to keep their investments up. An investment is education, and expense is prison. And so to have a Cadillac prison system where we're number 1 in the country in per prisoner expenditure, and number 41 in per pupil, is nuts. That's a technical term, by the way.
Delaine, there's some water behind that plant
thank
too,
you.
if you'd like. I know I'm peppering you with some questions, and we're going to get a few more, but I wanted to touch on something you mentioned about around investment, and that had to do with investing in our teachers. We know that the early childhood field and early educators are not compensated nearly enough, and we also know that the K-12 teachers aren't compensated nearly enough. What would you do to address that issue, number one, but also number two, do you see this as a gender equity issue where the vast majority of teachers, both early childhood and K-12, are women, yet they're so underpaid?
Well, I think there is some gender equity, but I also think there's a big values discussion we have to have about the importance of preschool. It's treated as if it's, kind of childcare. That's what it is, really, well, in a lot of people's eyes, when it's really child development, when it's really education. And the sooner you begin it, the better off the children are, and the better off everyone else is. So that's why I'm arguing that I'll be the governor from preschool to graduate school, because we have to make it more easier and more affordable to go to college if we're going to increase both the pay and the skills of our preschool teachers. So I want us to have a system like France and Italy and most of Europe and a lot of Asia, where we do have far more education in our preschools, but that means we have to make preschools more education to get the degree more affordable. But that's true for all of our kids. And I want to just remind you, we did this once. When I left to go to UC Davis, I paid $82.50 a semester. That included my health insurance. My best friend bragged that she was only paying $42 at San Jose State. And the community colleges were zero. When you saw the headline that said New York became the first state to offer tuition-free community college, not true. We were the first, and we did it for over 30 years, and it's time to go back and do it again. Community colleges should be free. And we should reduce the cost of CSU and UC. And again, I'm just saying to all of you, I know it's expensive to live away from home, but the other problem is we need to start building colleges and universities instead of prisons. We have vast reaches of this state, especially in rural parts of California, that don't have colleges and universities. Amador County doesn't have any community college at all. They've now done an online arrangement with the Southern California Community College. But this is nuts. I went to UC Davis. It's still the furthest north campus we have. Davis is only about 2/3 of the way up the state. And we've got vast reaches of California that would love to have a CSU or community college. And I know there's people in Silicon Valley that want to create a UC Silicon Valley. If we have people that are willing to step up and do this, why don't we have the will to begin to think about the next generation of children having more opportunities to go to community college? The only reason we're not in worse shape than we're in is we've been adding and adding and adding students to the existing colleges. When I graduated from UC Davis, there were 8,000 students there. In the next year or two, we're going to hit 40,000 students. They're piling the kids in. But there is something to be said. It would actually be good for the economy if we paid teachers more who were in preschool. It would be good for the economy if we built more colleges and universities. It would be good for the economy if we educated more people. It would be good for the economy if we did the cost avoidance of giving kids preschool instead of prison. All of this is return on investment, which is the way we should be thinking about education. And for some reason, a bunch of people that weren't well educated thought that way out of a depression and war. We have to return to that thinking. And you know it here better than anybody. I'm fond of saying, the Silicon Valley is not here because of confluence of rivers. You have no Tigris, you have no Euphrates. You had a confluence of great educational opportunities. And I'm living proof. My dad got out of the Navy. I was in public school in San Francisco where I was one of 44 kids. And they looked around to buy a house, and they could have bought a bigger house for less money. But they bought the little house that cost more because San Carlos, California had better schools. My good friend Ted Lempert and I share this San Carlos connection. But when I was sworn in, most people go to the library, state library, or they go to the Capitol, or they go to Secretary of State's building or Treasurer's office. I went to Britton Acres Elementary School to be sworn in as superintendent of public instruction. because I wanted to make the statement that it had changed my life forever. And it had. Later, the second time I was sworn in at UC Davis. But we need to go back to the values that really made us who we are today. The reason the Silicon Valley is so fabulous is that a bunch of people that hardly had two nickels to rub together decided to dream great dreams for their children and grandchildren. And we are in this room, we are the beneficiaries. But we can't be timid at this point in our society because the world is changing. And the rest of the world looked at America and said, how'd they get so rich? Oh, they educated all their kids. So why aren't we doing that now?
Thank you, Delaine. And speaking of education, a lot of the work we've done here in Silicon Valley, but across the state, has focused on connecting the early childhood system, or lack thereof, to the K-12 system, to the community college system. What do you think are some of the connections that are missing, and what would you do as governor to make those connections stronger?
Well, first, I think we actually need to do some bigger investment in facilities themselves. They're not as important as the staffing, don't get me wrong, but I would like to see us build preschools at kindergarten through 4th or 5th or 6th, whatever your district has. I think it's really great if the preschool is actually at the elementary school, because then the little sister can look up at her big brother, or the little brother can look up at his big sister and say, I'm going over there to school soon. It's easier for the parents to drop off their kids at one location. It's easier for everybody, and it's better for the society. So first, I do think we have to focus, of course, on higher standards and education for the teachers themselves. One of the things that's infuriating to me is that when there was a decision made to fix Prop 13 by allowing a 55% vote to build the buildings, but it's still the 66 2/3 vote to staff the building. And when I say to everybody, if you could send your child to a beautiful school with a lousy teacher, or have your child taught by Socrates sitting on a rock, you should go with Socrates and the rock. So the staffing is more important than the building, and so we ought to, I'm not saying get rid of the 55% vote for the building, I'm saying we ought to change the local parcel tax to 55% for staffing, and that should include preschool as well as regular schools. Beyond that, I really do believe that we have to have a conversation in this state about getting more resources into education generally. And again, I'm not comfortable being 41st. I think we have to be in the top 10. That means a full court press, but let me just tell you. Remember I said budgets are statements of values. How do you budget in your family? You don't say to your kid, well, we're not going to send you to UC because we need a new car. You don't say, well, we're not going to send you to, this music camp you want to go to because we want to buy a new couch. The kids always come first in a well-balanced family. So when I got accepted at Davis, my parents needed a new car. Their car was 10 years old. They wanted a new couch. My mother was a styler, and my brother and I had done our trampoline act, and there was a spring coming out of she was mortified. And my dad wanted to go to the family reunion, and they wanted to send their daughter to Davis. Remember, it's still expensive, even back then, to live away from home. And so at that time, you'd be shocked to know this, but girls couldn't borrow money until they were 21 under the Student Loan Act. Boys could borrow at 18. So it meant my parents had to borrow on 3-year loans at 7.5%. And my mother was afraid they couldn't afford it, that, 3 years' time they'd be making twice their house payment on my student loans. So I went into my father and I said in a very mature voice, Daddy Sugar says I can't go today. My father went into my mother and said, Dottie, what's this about Delaine not going to Davis? She said, Hank, I don't see how we can afford it. I talked to the bank manager. He says it's going to cost us this. My dad said, we have to find a way. And my mother stood up straight and said, well, what do you suggest we do? Take a second mortgage out on the house? My dad thought for a minute and he said, we'll sell the damned house if we have to. She's going to Davis. That's values. And budgets are statements of values. And you need a governor that has a value that says the most important single thing the state of California does is educate its children. Oh, by the way, Article 16, Section 8 of the state constitution, go look it up. From all revenues, there shall first be set aside the monies for the education of children through institutions of higher education. It's actually in the document. They take an oath to uphold, but most people don't know it's there, including too many electeds in Sacramento. Last year, I gave out a bunch of copies of that to candidates for legislature, so I know at least some of them now know. But go look at it. Article 16, Section 8. It really says that. And that's not the way we're budgeting in California this morning.
Thank you, Delaine. I want to switch gears a little bit from learning to health. So we all know children can't learn if they have oral health challenges, toothaches, vision problems, developmental challenges as they get older. What are your thoughts on some of the ways that the state can help out with early childhood health, particularly when the federal government is looking to or has eliminated the CHIP program? Not sure if it's going to be reinstated or not. What are your thoughts on how California can really ensure the health of every child here?
It's a very serious problem in preschool and in K-12, and I'm very concerned about things that this administration has proposed. There's a lack of understanding, fundamental lack of understanding on the people in this administration about health. For example, do you know why we have a school lunch program? The year was 1946. There was a draft that year, and they turned away a record number of young men, more than they turned away in 45, 44, 43, 42, or 41. You know why there were so many kids turned away in 46, 19-year-old men? These were children who had their developmental years during the Great Depression. They had crooked spines, foreshortened limbs, bad eyesight, bad teeth. So if you go online and you look at the National School Lunch Act, it says this, and I quote, "The health of our nation's children being a matter of national security, the Congress does ordain and establish the National School Lunch Act." I'm not making this stuff up. Truman signed it into law as a matter of national security. So to say we're going to save some money by cutting back on school nutrition, we should be expanding school nutrition. Every kid in California should have the opportunity to have a free, nutritious lunch and a breakfast. And I'm not kidding you, and it should be at preschool. And yes, we ought to have, we're dead last in the number of nurses and counselors we have in the regular K-12 schools. We need to bring back the nurses and counselors. It was a nurse that called my mother and said, "Go get her eyes checked. I think she needs to wear glasses." Guess what? I was very nearsighted. It was the nurse who found that out. So we need to do, yes, K-12, but also earlier, from the earliest days. We need to look at these children and understand that many malnourished children are fat because they're eating all the wrong stuff. So we need to really work much more closely with parents on information about what you should be feeding your kids, how you should be feeding your kids, and we need to move away from the sugary drinks, the sugared things that are so interesting to kids and are so dangerous to them. We have an amazingly high rate of asthma, of diabetes, of a host of other problems, health problems that are costing us a fortune that we could avoid altogether if we just focused on nutrition and better child developmental practices when they're really small. We can do this, but we've got to have a full court press and somebody who understands that it isn't just would be nice if we could do this. It's a matter of national security that we do this. We need that old-fashioned attitude that Truman and people of both parties had when they installed the National School Lunch Act. Values. And what we're missing in Sacramento right now is courage and vision and heart. We've got a bunch of modest little proposals that people are doing instead of the kind of big ideas that used to drive who we were. The idea that we wouldn't have as an absolute priority child development in preschool, prenatal care, and health care, that we know it's pay me now or pay me later. So I'd rather spend $1 today than $10 or $100 or $1,000 later because the child. We had an occasion when I was in the legislature. This doctor was addressing the legislature on the issues of health care for children, and he said, "I had a terrible weekend. Friday night I was in the emergency room and they brought in a little boy, and I was just so glad we could save his life. He had 107 degrees of fever, terrible ear infection, raging through his body. And we did manage to save his life, but he's deaf in one ear now. And it's cost the state of California $56,000. So we saved a few dollars on antibiotics, and it cost that child his hearing, and it cost the state a lot more money. We're being penny-wise and pound-foolish right now, and for some reason, virtually every major first world and second world country with which we are competing has figured this out. Why can't we do it? I don't know. But I think it takes leadership. I think it takes somebody who challenges people in Sacramento to have the courage and the vision and the heart to do what's right. There's too many, little tweaks that we're doing rather than doing let's do the budget the way the Constitution says. First, we set aside the money for children. Then we figure out how we do the rest of it. But that's what you do in your family. I just want to remind you.
Thank you, Delaine. And I want to end with this last question, and we'll turn it over to the audience. But you had mentioned paid family leave as being a priority for almost every country in the world. California has a paid leave law as an example of how to support parents with young children. What are some other things that you would do as governor to support parents of young children?
Well, honestly, I think, I voted for the first unpaid leave, and it was actually controversial, which shocks the heck out of me. And then we got to paid leave, and now we need to extend that. But please understand that a short leave in Europe is 9 months. There are countries that have 3 years of paid leave. There are countries that also encourage mothers, when they do go back to work, to go part-time because they subsidize them for being part-time. So we ought to have an honest conversation. It's not enough to just pay lip service to the importance of children and early childhood development. It's important to have public policies that support that. So I think we need to absolutely make this a priority for us as a state. We ought to have a minimum of 9 months of paid leave at some point in the not distant future. And remember, we're California. We used to be the golden state that led this country. We can do that again. But it really is true that we are not leading the world in any sense of the word when it comes to maternity and paternity leave. A lot of countries have paid leave for the dads as well. And this whole idea of bonding with your child and learning with your child in those early months, it's a learning for both the parents and the kids. And then we have to think more about what we do to make sure these children are in safe developmental situations. My grandparents lived with us so that we could have childcare. Not everybody can do that. Lots of you live hundreds and thousands of miles away from your families. And so today in California, we're not here to talk about things like affordable housing and transportation, but if you add the extra commute that so many young families have, and then the cost of housing. I know somebody who's a pretty successful person, a very successful person, whose son and his wife and their 3 kids are converting the mother's garage into living space because they don't want to live out in Stockton. You know you're in trouble when you're on the front page of the New York Times with an article about a woman who gets up at 2:30 in the morning in Stockton to commute to her job in the Bay Area. 8-hour job, 6 hours of commute. There's something really dangerous about that when you add to that the idea of an early childhood experience for the children of those commuters. And so we have to have a more honest discussion about what we're going to do to relate housing and transportation and healthcare and education, and with a focus on families, with a focus on the future. That's who we used to be. And, I remind you all that there have been some times in this country's history when we hardly had 2 nickels to rub together, but we had people that had vision and they did the right things, even though it looked like it was a crazy idea. I like the Lincoln story. You remember Lincoln, 1862? He's got a civil war. His predecessor, James Buchanan, arguably the worst president in history, but I think he's getting competition. James Buchanan had vetoed the Morrill Act. The Morrill Act was a bill that said we ought to have a system of land-grant colleges such that every state would have at least 1 college for the working classes and the agricultural classes. He didn't live to see any of it. But how did he do? There's 181 land-grant colleges. You know them as Duke and Purdue and Cornell. You know them as Texas A&M and Florida A&M. A little school called UC Berkeley. A little school called UCLA, UC Davis. You understand? We have 181 land-grant colleges because a guy did a dangerous thing during a dangerous time, and what we call it now when we look back is leadership, just like the School Lunch Act. Courage, vision, and heart is what we need, not just timid policies, real policies that will help our kids. My favorite quote, some of you have heard me say, is, "Children are living messages we send to a time we will never see." What is our message? I was sent here by a machinist and a sales clerk who cared so much for me and my future that they gave me this amazing education. I want that for every kid in California. I hope you do too. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I learned two things today. One, Delaine Eastin is running for governor because she chooses children. So I've learned that. I've also learned she knows quite a bit about children and education, and particularly the California State Constitution, which I had not read and looked up, and she's absolutely accurate, and I will start using that in my remarks. I want to thank the team. I want to thank all of you who are advocates. I want to say just a couple of words. One, we have an opportunity in what we're trying to do here and that we've kicked off today to send a message to the future, a future we won't see. But to do that, we have got to galvanize this state around this issue. It is a winning proposition. 87%, yes, we've disinvested. You've heard the stats. You are advocates that, for the most part, are on the train and driving the train. We've got to use now the tools of social media to get out there, download the report at Choose Children, send it to your networks, tell people about it, tell them your commitment, share the easy-to-use information, get everybody out for the rest of these events, the next one being November 2nd. So are you on board? Yeah, that's, you know, it's that was the big, like, wind up, and you're not on board yet. Are you on board? All right, thank you. All right, that's on board. I also want to make clear, because I've been asked this by a number of people. Well, you know, and Erica touched on one part of it, but you know, you're a community foundation. Why are you engaging both in this statewide discussion? Because aren't you supposed to think, you know, locally? And aren't you crossing some line of advocacy and lobbying? And I want to be direct to those things. The challenge to solving the early learning issues in San Mateo and Santa Clara County are in Sacramento. And you have to understand that. It's in Sacramento. It's in the disinvestment that's happened there. And until we get that investment, I can't do what I need to do here. They are intricately tied. Just intricately tied. And so this notion that I can't, you know, well, why aren't you just looking within your pond? My pond is affected by what happens at the state, and as was mentioned, some things that actually happen at the federal government. So if I really care about here, I've got to care about the places that are making decisions that affect here. Are you with me? All right, the second thing. And Delaine got to this. It's about values. It's about values. Being nonpartisan and non-political does not mean valueless. Some nonprofits confuse nonpartisan and non-political, i.e., supporting a particular candidate or getting involved in the elections process with a sense that they can't take positions on what they care about. We care about early learning and childhood development. We have a point of view that there have been disinvestments. We believe people running for office should affirm that value and vote accordingly. And saying that isn't making us partisan or political. It means we believe in a set of values. And so I think we've got to be more vocal, those of us in the nonprofit sector, that we don't lose our right to give voice in the process, fully and authentically, and at the same time retain our status as being nonprofit and nonpartisan and non-political. You with me? All right, so last thing. You talked about the other related issues of housing and transportation. And those of you who have a mind to it, on November 15th, we are having our On the Table event. It is a day-long discussion in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. It's called On the Table, where people will host meals. It can be breakfast. It can be lunch and pizza. It can be snacks. Any time during the day, have some potato chips. And there are about 6 or 7 questions that are guided questions that we ask you to discuss, and then have one person upload that so we can aggregate that information. So if you care about housing, you can host something, right? Look in the mirror. You can host something. Your organization can host several things. Your friends can do it. Your faith organization can do it. Your golfing club, your sewing club, your Spanish club, your yoga group, doesn't matter. We've got to generate a public will, because as we were getting to, these things are interconnected. And focusing on one doesn't negate the importance of another. So for those of you who have the will and the energy, please join us on the 15th. And for all of you who are committed to this, download it, share it, and we'll see you back here, right? It's back here, Evo, on November 2nd. Thank you all so much for coming and for being so great today.